Chapter 2. It was only the second day of walking, and Edward was positive the temple made a mistake. He wasn't the chosen one. He was not the chosen one because he was going to die right here, right now, in the middle of the road, because walking was the worst thing ever, and why had the stupid idiot prophecy specified that he had to go on foot? Couldn't he have gotten a horse or carriage or something? Edward fell down on his ass, legs deciding they were done. "You comin'?" Lila said. Edward stared at her incredulously. How were Nova and Lila so unaffected? He was sweating buckets. Why was it so hot? It was only spring. Nova handed him a water skin. Edward took it gratefully. "Thank you." Edward flopped down onto his back, uncaring of the dirt from the road. "Is he okay?" Lila whispered to Nova. "He's rich," Nova whispered back. "Oh." "I heard that," said Edward. Nova flinched. "I haven't walked this much in my entire life. We are taking a break." "Yes, Master. I'll refill our water while you do. There's a creek nearby." "You do that," said Edward. He handed back the empty water skin. Lila sat down next to him, and Nova went off the road and disappeared between the trees. "Walking is awful," Edward told Lila. "You'll get used to it." Edward made some sort of an unintelligible sound. It was a cross between a moan and a gurgle. "What?" Edward groaned and sat up, shaking the dirt out of his hair. He was kind of regretting getting it dirty when he was not getting a bath for at least 2 more days. The fact he was blonde did not help either. "I wish I wasn't the chosen one," he blurted out. Whoops. Venting to a child was not something he was particularly interested in. "If you don't save the world, everyone will die," Lila said. She seemed pretty unconcerned. "Don't get me wrong, I'm gonna do it. Don't worry." Edward sighed and rubbed his temples. "If I was the chosen one, I would be great at it, and I wouldn't be mopey at all," Lila informed him. "Also, I would wear a shirt that said chosen one, so everyone would know and be nice to me." Edward snorted. Lila continued to tell him what she'd do if she were the chosen one. Edward couldn't focus on her words, though. It wasn't just the walking. It wasn't that Edward didn't like helping people either. He always had, since he was small. He just preferred help of a more mundane kind. Doing chores, running errands, helping find things. Uncomplicated, unstrenuous, and it made people happy. But this was all just too much responsibility for him. The lives of the entire human population were resting in his hands. If he failed, they all died, as Lila had just reminded him. Well, he had already had one breakdown over that before his trip even started, so there was no need to do that again. At least he had Nova now. If he hadn't been the chosen one, he never would have gotten to see him again, and Edward wouldn't trade that for anything. "I'm back, Master," said Nova. "We have plenty of water now. Are you ready to go?" "Yes, I am," said Edward, smiling at him. He stood up and his legs gave out immediately. Lila burst out laughing. Edward had to take several breaks throughout the rest of the day, but it was finally drawing to a close. "It's getting dark, Master," said Nova. "This clearing seems like a good place to stop, if it pleases you." "I'd be happy with literally anything," said Edward. "My legs are killing me." Other campers had been there before. There was a fire pit in the center of the clearing, and most of the grass was worn away. Nova began to set up camp, pulling out the bedrolls from the bag he carried. One was brand new. The other was old and worn, but it still looked usable. "I can help set up," Edward said. "Thank you for your kind offer, Master, but there is no need to trouble yourself." Lila tugged on Nova's sleeve. Nova?" Lila said. "I'm sorry, I don't have my bedroll. My parents have it." "Oh no," said Edward. "Don't worry," said Nova. "You can take mine." Are you sure? Where will you sleep? We have an extra blanket and a coat, said Nova. That will be more than enough for me. He pulled out a blanket and began smoothing it out, placing the coat on top. Do you want to share? Said Edward. He was more than happy to share. Thrilled, more like. He could hold Nova close through the cold night, keeping him warm and burying his nose in his soft black curls. I wouldn't want to impose on you, Master. Besides, the bedroll is far too small for two. I'm sorry, said Lila. She fiddled with her shirt's hem. This is my fault. It's all right, said Nova. I could sleep on the blanket with the coat instead, she suggested. No. Done with the conversation, Nova set about making dinner. Lila and Edward hovered around him with a lack of things to do. How did all that fit in one bag? Lila asked, as Nova pulled out a metal pot. It's enchanted from the temple. It allows me to carry everything my master might need without slowing him down. So it's not heavy? Not really, no. Please sit, Master, Lila. Dinner will be ready shortly. I don't need anything, said Lila. I have my own food. Are you sure? Edward said. Mm-hmm. Lila pulled out her sack of food and took out some jerky. Edward wondered if he should push the matter further, but she seemed happy enough. When Nova was finished cooking, he handed Edward a bowl of soup and sat down next to him with his own bowl. It was quite good, even if it wasn't what Edward was used to eating. Nova was a good cook. We should tell scary stories, said Lila, after the food was mostly gone. No, said Nova. What? Why not? Edward said. Of course, if my master wishes to, it's his right. But it's just... You get nightmares, master. Please forgive me for presuming... Edward lit up. Nova held his hands out in front of him again, but he ignored it. You remember that? Nova turned red, which was adorable. He stared at the empty bowl of soup in his lap. Yes, sir. You should tell a story instead, Edward said. One that won't give me nightmares. Nova's eyes widened, and he glanced at Lila and back to Edward, as if checking to make sure he was really talking to him. If my master wishes, I could tell a story of the gods, Nova offered nervously. If... I don't want to hear his dumb, stupid temple story, Lila said. I would like to hear one, Nova. Nova shot a triumphant look at Lila until he realized Edward was looking at him and it disappeared. He began his story. Lila grumbled. The goddess Night loved to create. She made the stars one by one, placing each in the sky with the utmost care. She loved each one. One day she said, I've made so many beautiful stars, but there is no one to see them but me. The other gods focus on the things they have made. Fire focuses on their flames, water focuses on her sea, and growth focuses on their plants. None of the gods notice the beauty of my stars, so I will create humans so that they can look at the stars and wonder in awe, and they will be happy as the stars have made me. And so she made humanity. She showed the other gods her creation, and they were amazed. The humans appreciated and loved everything the gods had made. Through the humans, the gods learned how to appreciate the others' domains, and so they grew to love their fellow gods at the same time they grew to love the humans. Night said to the other gods, Please take care of my beloved humans. And then, because she was so tired after making humanity, she fell asleep, and she's still asleep to this day. Nova was nervous at first, but relaxed as he continued talking. His voice was soft and lilting. He did not act, and he did not change his voice throughout the story. It was more the words telling it than Nova himself. Simple, but soothing. It reminded Edward of when he would sneak over the temple's walls at night, into the yard, to visit Nova. They would sit together in the grass, tucked away in a little corner of the yard in case anyone looked out a window. Nova would whisper stories to him, and eventually he would fall asleep on Edward's shoulder. Edward would sit and hold him until he regrettably had to wake him up and go home. Nova had always loved the gods and their stories. It was nice to see Nova finally relax, even if just a bit. Hopefully, now that they had traveled a little together, he would start to act normal again. "That sucked," Lila said. "That's a story for babies. Everyone knows that. Edward, you tell a story, a real one." Nova looked downright murderous. Edward laughed. "I think it's time for bed. Thank you for the story, Nova. It was nice. Much more relaxing than a ghost story." "I'm glad it pleases you, Master." Nova stood, bowed, and then took Edward's empty bowl. Edward watched him clean up. Any trace of the relaxation he had only moments ago was completely gone. Edward sighed. Well, it was only the second night. Nova couldn't sleep. He was cold. The coat didn't cover him completely, and his feet only had sandals on them, since the temple had not thought to give him good walking shoes, or even socks. He had never slept outside before. He could not say he was a fan. It was a relief when the sky started to lighten. A while until sunrise yet, but Nova could clean up camp and himself and prepare breakfast while he waited to wake Master and Lila. Despite how slowly and quietly he prepared everything, it was over too fast, and then Nova had nothing to do. He had already packed up the blanket and coat he slept on, so he knelt by Master's bedroll on the still wet grass. He looked at his master, who was sleeping soundly with a little smile on his face. His long golden hair was out of his usual ponytail, spread out around his face like a halo. Nova didn't want to think about him right now. He tore his gaze away from him and looked up at the sky. Still no sun. Lila shimmied out of her bedroll to sit next to him. Nova hadn't even realized she was awake. "You can sleep a bit longer, you know." "I can't," Lila said. They sat there in silence. What if I can't find my parents?" said Lila. "What if they—" She trailed off. She rested her chin on her knees, staring ahead vacantly. Nova frowned. "Do you want a story?" said Nova. "Not a temple story this time. Promise." He offered Lila a half smile. "Yes, please."